We've been going through the Lord's Prayer here for several weeks, but my journey really started a few years ago where I decided to take this a little more challenging for myself, and I began a practice of trying to pray through the Lord's Prayer. And so when you do, and I go and I begin to pray it, oftentimes I'll always leave out one part. It's uncanny how oftentimes as I try to go through memory and I pray the Lord's Prayer, and you want to pause on a part of it, and you pick back up, which is a good way to pray it. You pray a couple sentences, thy kingdom come, thy will be done, stop, meditate, think, right? But when I go through that, I always leave out one part, and that is the forgiveness part. Forgiveness is always left out by me, and I get down, like, what part did I miss? What part did I miss? And I go back, darn it, I forgot the whole forgiveness part. That God has forgiven us, and we are to forgive others. And so I'll go back to that. I don't think it's by accident. I think it's the most challenging part of the whole prayer, because it starts meddling with our heart about not only getting God's forgiveness, but being able to give forgiveness is very challenging. You see, I've discovered as I thought more about forgiving, it's a very complex equation to forgive, because first of all, we have to be forgiven by our holy God, right? In many cases, we have to forgive ourselves for the things that we've done that kind of haunt us, our sins. Then we also, get to ask other people to forgive us. That comes easy. Hey, I was wrong, will you forgive me? But the hard part is forgiving other people. The hard part is, the last part of that is, I need to forgive others. We've been forgiven. I asked for forgiveness, but we have to give it right back to people. In fact, it's such an important command that at the very end of the Lord's Prayer, you're not gonna believe this is so fascinating. You say the Lord's Prayer, the very next verse in Matthew 14 and 15 says this: for if you forgive men when they sin against you, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive men their sins, your Father will not forgive you. That's a harsh word. Back in 1988, I was exiting high school, going into college. There was a movie that came out called Rain Man. Many of you may not have seen or heard it. It's been so long ago, and I'm getting pretty old. But Rain Man was a story about a severely autistic man named Raymond. And Raymond was affectionately called Rain Man by his brother when they were kids, because he couldn't say Raymond, he would say Rain Man. And he was played by Dustin Hoffman. And Tom Cruise was his brother, Charlie Babbitt. And so what happened, their dad died, they got reacquainted, and Tom Cruise had not been around his brother at all. And so he's trying to figure out what it was like to be around a severely autistic brother, and he had no idea. And Tom Cruise, his character was full of pride, all about the money, and had very little patience. And so at one point, as they're navigating the country to get their inheritance back, he's sitting at a breakfast table, and sweet Rain Man is sitting there, Raymond is sitting there at the table, and Charlie Babbitt gets mad. He gets really upset. And he grabs Raymond's neck and he squeezes it. And in his fashion, you have to see the scene, Dustin Hoffman, he goes, uh-oh, and he grabs it and he gets a notebook out and he's flipping like crazy. Flip, 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 flip. And he gets his pencil out and he starts writing a sentence in there. And he writes down there in 1988, Charlie Babbitt. Charlie Babbitt, he squeezed and pulled and hurt my neck in 1988. And Charlie Babbitt was so mad. He's like, what are you doing? And he snatches that notebook from him. He goes, what is that? What is this? And he goes, that's my serious injury list. And you squeezed, he made an entry. And so he looked at his book and he had an entry in his book for all the people who had hurt him throughout his life. And it was a big, long journal. And he called it his serious injury list. And for some reason, that scene has stuck out in my mind, because I'm sure like you, I'm pretty good at keeping a list of people who have hurt me. And I know you are too. The people who have hurt us, you almost don't need a pencil and paper to write it down, right? Because starting as a young guy in my life, in my family of origin, going through high school, going to college, coming out of college, all the different things, there is a long list of people who have hurt me, said things that were hurtful. You might even say sinned against me in different ways. And we don't need help, right? But I would submit everybody here has your serious injury list, and we can go down it if you like. Now, the question is, on your serious injury list, those who have harmed you, hurt you, sinned against you, how have you done throughout your life of giving forgiveness? Of giving forgiveness, of not being held captive by those hurts and those people, because you could live your whole life as a prisoner of an unforgiving person, of not releasing the other person from the offense they gave to you, whether it be very small. And I'm telling you, as I know, there are some great big things that seem nearly unforgivable, but there is no such thing in God's economy. We're gonna look at that today, about how to become great forgivers. How can you become a great forgiver? But I think the first question is right now is take a little inventory, right? Look at your list, think of your list. And again, this is a tad bit of homework as you go home today, but think about the list of people, and might you say, is there any unforgiveness in my heart that I'm withholding from somebody else? How would I know? How can I tell? What are the symptoms of that unforgiving heart? And these strike pretty close to home. Number one, if you have reoccurring anger or resentment towards a person. In other words, you feel anger rising up when you think about them. Often indicates an unresolved, unforgiven issue. Bitterness is a lingering form of anger that forgiveness is meant to release. So if you find resentment or anger, and it's chronic, it just doesn't stop, it keeps coming back season after season, this has a hold on me, you might be dealing with an unforgiving issue. Number two, desire for them to pay. I want them to pay. Man, I'm gonna get them back. We're gonna do retribution. They're gonna be punished. And I would say sometimes, like in my past, to give you an example of retribution, I used to love to prank people in my earlier days, but I was more of a retaliatory pranker. When someone would get me, I would bring the vengeance. I would get help, I would spend money, time, and energy, and my golly, you get me, I'm gonna get you back 5 times as bad, right? And sometimes we carry that over in the way we deal with the people who have hurt us. I wanna hurt you back, for real, and real matters of pain. But if you desire for them to pay for it, it's another sign, that you have not dealt with that. Romans 12:19 says this, never take your own revenge. Don't do it, it says, but leave room for God's wrath. If there's anything that needs to be done, God says he'll take care of it. You don't need to do it, and I don't need to do it. So a symptom of that is you want justice in a way, a personal way for that person, or you feel glad when something bad happens to them. If that's the case, you very well could have unforgiven stuff in there, and it's not good. Number 3, avoidance or emotional distance. This is kind of obvious. They hurt me, I don't want to be around them, I'm gonna avoid them, I'm gonna stay away from them. Sometimes the heart protects itself, right? By withdrawing rather than forgiving. A symptom of that is you avoid the person whenever possible. Or you feel tension or anxiety every time they're around you. Could have an issue of not dealing with forgiveness with them. Number 4, when you talk about that person negatively, man, when someone really gets me and gets on my list or your list, we can run them down real fast, right? And we find a friend to tell a friend and practice the story on them. You're not gonna believe what they did to me. You may be dealing with unforgiveness. And so another one is loss of compassion towards them. Forgiveness restores the ability to see that person with mercy. But if you have no mercy towards them, that's not good. Or you cannot pray sincerely for them. You only want to pray for them in your prayer closet, not gonna do it. Or you struggle with wishing them well. And the last one was very important, is spiritual disruption. You have a hard time spending time with God, being alone, and you begin to get distant. Maybe you distance yourselves from church, maybe you distance yourself from people. There's a spiritual disruption. And that means sometimes you just can't get yourself focused on prayer because it continues to needle you. But you may have a problem with unforgiveness. And I'm gonna tell you right now, all of us struggle with this ongoing at different times of our life. You may have at one point been a great forgiver, but you stopped and you're holding on to resentment or unforgiveness towards a person. And that's what Jesus is talking about so seriously here, that we must become great at forgiving. Forgiving people, y'all, are the happiest, freest, most joyful people to be around. In fact, the unforgiven people are the most curmudgeon-y, don't want to be around them, distance yourself from them, because they feel toxic when we get in that mode of unforgiveness. And so God has given us the ability to be great forgivers. We're gonna look at the aspects of that. How can you do it? Number 1, you have to realize, that forgiving others is essential. It's essential. You have to do it, right? What did the verse first say I said? Number 1 is you don't forgive, God doesn't forgive you. It's essential. But there's a parable that Jesus shared. I'm going to read to you, and I love this parable because it's so telling of exactly the problem. And obviously, I couldn't put it in better words than Jesus did. Matthew 18:21 and following says, "Then Peter came to him, Jesus, and said, 'Lord, how often shall I forgive my brother and forgive him? 7 times?' And Jesus said, 'No, I say to you, 77 times. For this reason, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who wished to settle accounts with his slaves. When he had begun to settle them, one owed him 10,000 talents. More was brought to him. But since he did not have the means to repay, the Lord commanded him to be sold along with his wife, his children, and all that he had. And repayment was to be made. So the slave fell to the ground, prostrated himself before him, and said, "Have patience with me, and I will repay you everything." And the Lord of that slave felt compassion, and he released him, and he forgave him that debt. But the slave went out, that guy went out, and he went and found somebody who owed him 100 denarii. And he seized him, and he began to choke him, and he said, "Pay back what you owe." So his fellow slave fell to the ground, and he began to plead, "Have patience with me, I will repay you." But he was unwilling, and he went and threw him in prison until he should pay all that was owed. So when his fellow slaves saw what had happened, they were deeply grieved. And he came and reported to their Lord all that had happened. Then summoning him to the Lord, he said, "You wicked slave, for I forgave you your debt because you plead with me. Should not you have also had mercy on your fellow slave in the same way?" And he said in verse 34, "And now the Lord, moved with anger, handed him over to the torturers until he should repay all that was owed to him." In 35, he says, "My heavenly Father will also do the same to you if each of you does not forgive from your heart." That's a hard word, is it not? Jesus comes back to this. If you don't forgive others the way he's forgiven you, that is a major stopping issue in your life and my life. And so if you think about this parable, you think about the king. The king is simple. The king is God, right? The king is God. The first slave, the first servant there is the one who had this massive debt he could not pay. 10,000 talents was an exorbitant amount of money. It could not be repaid. And so the king took the loss. He goes, "You know what? I'm gonna take the loss. You don't take it, I'll take it. And you go and be free," after he pleaded with him. The second one, he was the one, he went out and he found the next guy, the next servant. He only owed 100 denarii. That was like a fraction of the money. He had been given this much and he wouldn't forgive this little tiny bit. Yet he beat him, he says, and he threw him in prison. And that would be us when we have unforgiving hearts. And the other servants that saw him, that would be like the church of friends that go, "Hey, listen, this is an injustice. This is not right. How can this happen? This guy was forgiven much." And they went and reported it back to the king. And the king said, "That's it. You didn't get it. You didn't understand how much I forgave you." And so you see this great picture, and there's 3 things to draw from this. Takeaways. Number 1, if you truly grasp how completely God has forgiven your infinite debt through the gospel, you'll become a forgiving person. The key to forgiving others is to realize how much you have been forgiven. And the third part is unforgiveness usually shows a failure to grasp the depth of God's grace upon you and upon me. And so you have that deal that it is essential for us to forgive. You have to do it. Jesus made it very clear. The next point we're going to look at is forgiving others is supernatural. It's supernatural. You're never going to feel like it. You're never going to wake up and go, "I think it today, I'm going to get up and just go forgive a bunch of people," or that person on my list. And maybe it's from 10 years ago, maybe it's from last week, but you never wake up and feel like it. It's not natural. It's a supernatural transaction that must take place, but you do it as an act of your will. I'm going to do this. What I've discovered in my areas of unforgiveness, I burst into very quickly a full-grown 57-year-old man who acts 8 years old, right? Someone sins against me, I can transform in an instant to an 8-year-old. I was reading a book recently that said that most adults have the emotional intelligence to deal with problems of an 8-year-old. In fact, I would submit most of it in this room, we have problems, we convert to an 8-year-old, and when someone hurts us or offends us or says something, we just go, just go kick them in the shin, or, just go to the schoolyard and watch what happens. Or I'm gonna put you in a headlock, I'm gonna give you one of those, or I'm gonna say, verbally lash back out at you like I'm a juvenile, right? It happens to us all. We act like 8-year-olds, and it comes out a lot. So you just have to know you're never gonna feel like it. It's a supernatural transaction that you have to act with God's help in his way. So instead of just harboring unforgiveness, let's do like the Nike commercial and just do it. If it's still the commercial, just do it. Do it. I'm committed. I'm gonna figure this out. I'm going to forgive. Okay, next point. Forgiveness and forgiving others is a vertical thing before it's horizontal. It's vertical before it's horizontal. And guess it was earlier this year, I got in an argument with somebody, a friend, over a matter that was so stupid and so insignificant, but nonetheless, I got in an argument and I thought they were wrong and they had wronged me. I'm sure that person thought I was wrong and I wronged them. Has this ever happened to y'all before? And you kind of like, what are we doing here? Like, what are you doing to me? And they're thinking, what am I doing to you? And we kind of got into it, and I turned into an 8-year-old. Literally, I burst into a big old 8-year-old, and I just let it fly. I mean, I was hollering and yelling and upset, and I got done with that conversation, and I thought to myself, what have I just done? How did that just happen? And it was immediate, like punch in the stomach to myself. I'm like, I've just ruined that person's week, and I've ruined my week, and I hate conflict, and I don't want to have to live with this. And thankfully, I got this little note in my email box from a guy named Paul Tripp. I follow his blog. He's a great writer, devotional writer, and it was so short, y'all. You should look it up, but it's called Forgiveness Goes Up Before It Goes Out. It was maybe like a 5-minute read, but it was exactly what I needed to hear. So I went home that evening, and I was really agonizing about the dumb thing I'd done, and still feeling justly so acting that way. I'll be honest, I felt like I was justified to be angry, just not like that. And so I go into my closet at home and I close the door. And I did exactly what the devotional said. And I got on my knees and I said, God, I need you to forgive me. I know I made mistakes. I know I was wrong in these ways. I ask for your forgiveness. And I verbalized in that moment, I forgive that other person. I forgive for whatever I perceived them to do to me, which may not have been real or not, but I was really angry. And I wouldn't say it was like immediate, but I just knew I was being obedient. How about that? I forgive them. And so then the next day I came out and I issued an apology. In the apology, I said, look, I'm sorry. I'm embarrassed by my behavior. I'm surprised by it. Please forgive me. And the response was immediate. Reciprocated immediately. I do. I forgive you. And let's move forward. And it was done. Done. Man, it was like, what a case study of being set free and forgiving somebody else and being forgiven. But I learned a valuable lesson that I hope you hear, and please make note. You cannot go fake forgiveness. You can't fake it. I'm tempted to all the time, and just by human nature, I'm sorry, we forgive me. And we just flippantly say that to people, and it does not work that way because we're faking it, and it doesn't last because some of these other things I mentioned, the symptoms are still there. I avoid them. I talk about them. I'm angry at them. I'm not dealing with it. So you have to go up, give it to the Lord, forgive in your prayer closet by yourself, and then you walk out in it because you can't fake it. Forgiveness requires a time and a place, I've discovered. A time and a place. Personally, by yourself, praying, asking God to forgive you, and you forgive that person to God, not to their face. That's not the most essential part. We just tell God and we release them in the presence of God. So it goes up before it goes out. It's vertical before it's ever horizontal. So please hear me. If you just go out and try to say, I'm sorry, I'm wrong, please forgive me, but you've not talked to the Lord, it's not gonna take because it's a spiritual transaction first. All right, the next point we're looking at here is forgiving others will heal your broken heart. Forgiving others will heal your broken heart. When we get good at forgiving, it is a healing process. And sometimes we have big stuff to forgive, big stuff. The things I've mentioned before are very garden variety things, right? Broken relationships, people you work with, people you live with. But sometimes you have big things. And I think about those when forgiveness heals your broken heart. I think about some of my dear friends who went through very, very, very difficult divorces. Unfaithfulness, the hard things that come along with that. It's probably half the people in this room have experienced or tasted that, what it's like to be hurt by somebody you're married to and all that feels. And it's a very deep wound, right? And they may have grieved you, they may have sinned against you, they may have been a 99 or 100% wrong in the way they treated you, and maybe even with bad intent. But I can tell you right now, we're to forgive that person, but the pain doesn't go away, and that what gets confusing, right? How come if I've forgiven them, the pain is still there? Why hasn't it gone away yet, So if you've done the vertical thing first with God and the horizontal thing, what I want to do is encourage you, because when we practice forgiving others, is a healing act. And I'll give you an example. When I was in, 8 years old, grade school, I was playing baseball. And it was probably the first couple years where they were pitching at you, and there was a really fast pitcher. I mean, he was really big and strong, but I hit an inside pitch with my finger, and it smashed my finger, and it split my finger wide open. I mean, it was instant, and it throbbed, and it bled. It was like, shut the ballpark down. I was probably crying like a total baby. And so I have a picture here of it. And so my dad took me to the emergency room. We got stitches in it. I think it was my first round of stitches in my life. First of many seasons of stitches, because I seem to always have these kind of things happen. But if you can see that scar on my finger, I call it my Harry Potter scar. It's like, I don't know how I got that. But I remember the scar, and I remember the pain when I think about it. When I tell the story, I remember how bad it throbbed, right? I remember it being like stopping the whole thing. I remember it being a few weeks deal. I remember the pain. But guess what? Today, it doesn't cause me pain. I remember it. Every time I see that scar, I'm reminded of the pain. But it doesn't cause me pain right now. And I do believe as we practice forgiveness of others, the way God says to forgive others, that though we will be healed, and the pain's remembered, it just does not cause the intense pain it does at the moment. So, forgiving others will heal your broken heart. The next thing we're gonna look at is forgiving others does not mean, this is very important and very tricky point here, is not reconciliation, right? Forgiving others is not reconciliation. And so, if you think about that, you want to say, okay, immediately I want to be right with that person. But when you forgive somebody in your prayer closet and you release them from it and you say, God, I forgive them. I'm asking for help to forgive them. That doesn't mean you're going to walk out there and be best friends and pretend like it didn't happen. Because forgiveness is a command, right? But reconciliation is not. Reconciliation is dependent on the other person. They may not even know they hurt you. They may not be willing to deal with it. They may not be sorry they did it. So you can't wait till they have that remorse and I'm sorry, please forgive me. You may never get that in this lifetime because they may not be there. They may never be there. So forgiving others is not reconciliation. Forgiveness, right, is a heart decision before God. It's releasing the offender from the personal vantage, from the personal vengeance. I'm not going to get them. Choosing not to hold the offense against them. It can happen even if the offender never repents. I'm still forgiving them. I'm talking to God about it. And but reconciliation is restoring of that relationship, and it requires repentance, confession, and the building of trust. And that doesn't always happen in our lifetime. So forgiveness is commanded. Reconciliation is conditional, right? So think about that a minute, because there's some things you're not going to be able to resolve with the other person, but you still can forgive them. I think about the story of Joseph in the Bible. One of the most fascinating stories, and talk about a roller coaster of events, as Joseph had so many people mistreat him. I bet his serious injury list was long and went many decades of people that hurt him and sinned against him. But if you know anything about Joseph, he did not let that weigh on his heart. He forgave his brothers years and years and years, decades before he ever had reconciliation with his brothers. He released them from it, he forgave them from it, and he told them at the very end, you intended for evil, but God used it for good. But at the end of their life, towards the end of his life, they did come back and they said, we were wrong. We sinned against you. We should never have tried to kill you. We should have never done this to you. But it was many, many years before they had any kind of reconciliation. And so, to me, reconciliation you can put on the side right now. That probably requires some counseling and some help. But we still are told to forgive others no matter what. But I have to say, as you think about the different ways that we forgive and the people we need to forgive, and you think about the breadth of issues, right? I do consider, and I do know the people I've gotten to visit with and pray with over the decades of this church. There's some big stuff that I look at and I go, I don't see how that's going to happen. How can you forgive? How can you move forward? But there's such a story that I believe kind of puts a bit of hope in your heart that you can and you will, with God's help, forgive them. But it's the story of Corrie ten Boom. If you're not familiar with her, in her book, The Hiding Place, but her and her family were Jewish watchmakers and watch fixers in the World War II. And so they were Jewish, and so their whole agenda and their family was to hide Jews and protect them from the Holocaust and from going to concentration camps. And it's just such a great story. Christy and I listened to it a couple years ago. And so this happens, and she's in this concentration camp. They get arrested. They get sent to Ravensbrück, and they're held captive there. Her sister, her best friend, was there with her, and they mistreated them, tortured them. And at the hands of those guards, her sister died there at Ravensbrück. And by a miracle of God, Corrie made it out, and she got out after World War II is over. She began to speak and to teach and to share people about God's forgiveness. God is a God who forgives and God who cleanses. And after speaking at one church in Germany, this old German officer, Nazi officer, begins to approach her, and she said it was immediate. I recognized his face, and all those emotions flooded over me of all the torture and all the starvation and my sister's death. And I was paralyzed with fear. And he came up to me, he goes, Fraulein, he goes, I want you to know that I was one of your guards and part of the torture of your people and you. And he goes, but I became a Christian afterwards. And I've asked for God's forgiveness, and I know he's given it to me, but I'm asking you to forgive me. And she said she stood there trembling, fear, not one thing in her wanted to forgive him. And she, in fact, prayed to herself. She goes, God, I can't forgive him. Please forgive him for me. I can't. And he stuck out his hand. And she said, I just did it. I just stuck my hand out there and I grabbed his. And at that very moment, she said, a flood of tears came through my eyes. And he began to weep and I began to weep. And she goes, I began to have this deep feeling of love for him that was supernatural. She goes, I do forgive you, brother. I do forgive you from the bottom of my heart. And they wept and they cried together that day. And she said later, as she went on speaking about it, she said this quote here, forgiveness, she said, it's not a feeling. Forgiveness is not a feeling. Forgiveness is an act of the will. And when we obey Christ and choose to forgive, God supplies the love we do not have. And I share that story because I know we all have various degrees of hurt and stuff and people we need to forgive. But if she can do that, we can forgive those people in our life. But I'll tell you a greater compelling I think is amazing is many years ago, my brother and I went on a business trip long before I worked here to see Niagara Falls. And how many people have seen Niagara Falls? You ever been there? Golly, it's really everything they said it is. I mean, it is fascinating to see the falls and the volume of water and the flow coming out of that thing and just continues on and on and on and on. And you just stand there beside it and you're overwhelmed by the magnitude of the water and that little piece of God's creation. But the volume of the flow, I think about the flow of all that water that never stops. And I'm reminded of the great flow of love that God did for us in his son Jesus. That when he went to the cross all those years ago, he went with a very specific purpose. Jesus went because he knew the world was broken by sin. We've all sinned. We've all fallen short of the glory of God. Everybody going to be born after that day is going to sin and fall short of the glory of God. And man's greatest need was to be right with a holy God. And so when Jesus laid his life down and spread his arms on that cross, God vented his anger, his wrath, his judgment upon his son Jesus and not upon us, so that whoever confesses the name of Jesus may be forgiven, may be saved. And that happened for that generation. It happened for our generation, past, present, and future. Jesus' blood and his forgiveness flowed so mightily from that cross to the people, to us, to this very day, right? It was such a great flow of forgiveness given to us. How could we not pass it on? That's the point, right? We've been given so much love and so much forgiveness. How can we not pass it on to those around us? It's tricky, it's hard, but we can do it. So wherever you are today, maybe today you need to go back on that list of people you've not forgiven and go to your prayer closet and say, God, I'm gonna work on this. I'm gonna forgive them to you. Whether you tell them or not, that's not the issue. You tell Jesus about it. I forgive and I release. Help me to walk out in that. And I think that would be our homework assignment for this week, because I know all of us do get back in these positions where we harbor unforgiveness in our life. And when it does, it stalls us out. And Jesus is very clear. If you don't forgive others, it means you and I don't get it. We don't get it. So go back to Jesus and go back to letting his forgiveness flow to those around you. And I know God will put a smile on your face. Because I'm telling you, in the beginning, the happiest people, the freest people, the people that have the most joy and the most pleasure in this life are great, amazing, spirit-filled forgivers.